Imagine this. You're at a party, enjoying the celebrations, when out of nowhere, a shocking act of betrayal unfolds. A husband, in front of everyone, throws a cake right at his wife, humiliating her in the most public way possible. The room goes silent, eyes wide in disbelief. This isn't just a prank, it's a public humiliation. But what happens next? What could she possibly do to respond to such an outrageous act? You won't believe it. With calmness and poise, she does something that leaves everyone in shock, flipping the situation on its head. Her reaction is nothing short of graceful, yet the payback she delivers is a lesson in strength and dignity. Stick around to see how this surprising twist unfolds, because what she does next is something you need to see to believe. Stay tuned for the full story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. To understand why this moment was so intense, we need to take a step back and look at the couple's relationship. Lisa, a beautiful, confident woman, had been with her husband, Mark, for over 5 years. On the outside, everything seemed perfect: happy marriage, a stable home, and a family that adored them both. But behind closed doors, things weren't as ideal. Mark had always been controlling and possessive, but recently his behavior had taken a darker turn. The tension between them was growing, and it was clear that their marriage was on the brink of breaking down. Lisa, however, kept her composure. She didn't show the cracks to anyone, always carrying herself with grace and dignity. But that night at the party, something inside her snapped. What could have pushed Mark to do something so humiliating in front of everyone? And how would Lisa respond? The stage was set for an unforgettable confrontation. As the frosting slid down Lisa's face, the room was filled with gasps and murmurs. All eyes were on her, waiting to see how she would react. Mark stood there, smirking, clearly enjoying the attention he was getting. It wasn't the first time he'd tried to embarrass Lisa, but this time was different. This wasn't a private argument or a small jab. This was a full-blown public spectacle. Friends and family who had always admired their relationship were now questioning everything. Some whispered, "Why would he do that?" while others avoided looking at Lisa altogether, unsure of how to react. Lisa's mind raced as she stood there, calm on the outside but burning inside. Memories of every hurtful word, every dismissive gesture flooded back. She had always chosen to rise above his behavior, to not let him break her spirit. But tonight felt like a turning point. The room grew quieter as everyone watched, wondering what would she do next. For a long moment, Lisa didn't move. The cake on her face felt cold, sticky, and humiliating, but there was a stillness in her eyes, an unreadable calm that unnerved everyone around her. Mark, seeing her silence, seemed to think he had won. He began laughing, the sound echoing through the room, feeding off the awkwardness that hung in the air. "What's the matter, honey? You can't take a joke," he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to laugh along or stay quiet. Some had already begun to look away, as if they were watching a car crash they couldn't stop. But Lisa's eyes never left his. She wiped the cake off her face, slowly, deliberately. The room held its breath. What would she do? Was she going to break down, cry, or scream? That's what they'd expected. But instead, Lisa's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mark stepped forward, thinking he could intimidate her further, but Lisa didn't flinch. She reached for the napkin, her hands steady, as though she had a plan. The tension in the air thickened, and everyone leaned in, waiting for the next move. Whatever was about to happen, it was clear that this wasn't over. The question wasn't whether Lisa would fight back, but *how*, and in that moment, everyone in the room knew this was going to be far more than just a spat. Just as everyone thought Lisa might let the moment slide, she did something no one expected. She turned away from Mark, grabbed a glass of champagne from a nearby table, and calmly stepped onto the small stage where the microphone was set up. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure of what she was about to do. Mark's smug expression faltered slightly as Lisa tapped the microphone, her voice steady but filled with an edge of determination. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her tone polite but laced with something deeper. "I know this wasn't the kind of entertainment you signed up for, but since we're making this an evening to remember, I might as well say a few words." Her eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on Mark, whose confidence now looked more like unease. And then she began to talk, not about the party, not about the cake, but about the cracks in their marriage, the subtle disrespect, and the moments of quiet humiliation she had endured over the years. Her words weren't angry or vengeful. They were measured and painfully honest. The guests were spellbound, caught between shock and admiration for the way she carried herself. Mark's face grew red as he realized the situation was slipping out of his control. But just when it seemed like Lisa had laid everything bare, she paused, her voice dropping to a quieter tone. "And here's the thing about respect, it's earned. Tonight, I'm reclaiming mine." What she did next left everyone speechless, raising the tension to a breaking point no one saw coming. Just as the room hung on her every word, Lisa did the unexpected. She looked directly at Mark, her gaze unwavering, and, with a quiet but deliberate motion, she lifted the glass of champagne. Only it wasn't for a toast. She poured it, slowly, deliberately, over his head. The liquid trickled down his suit, a symbolic end to the games he'd been playing. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark stood there, stunned, dripping, his face a mix of rage and humiliation. For a moment, no one moved. And then, as the crowd started to murmur, Lisa's voice cut through the tension. "You wanted to embarrass me, Mark? Well, now you've had your moment." The clarity in her tone was like a final slap in the face. "But I'm done. I'm done being your punchline. I'm done letting you tear me down." The crowd was frozen in disbelief. This wasn't the dramatic confrontation they had expected. There was no yelling, no violence, just a powerful act of reclaiming control. Mark, looking like a man who realized his carefully constructed world was crumbling, opened his mouth to speak but stopped. The words wouldn't come. Instead, he just stood there, fuming, utterly defeated. Then came the twist. Just as Mark turned to storm out of the room, the door swung open, and Lisa's lawyer, a woman she had quietly hired weeks ago, entered. She wasn't there for the party. She was there to serve Mark with divorce papers. The air in the room shifted instantly, the tension evaporating as people realized this wasn't just a petty fight. It was the final nail in the coffin of a broken marriage. Lisa didn't even flinch. She stood tall, watching Mark as he read the papers, his face draining of color. The weight of everything he had done to her finally seemed to land. Mark was no longer in control, no longer the man with the power to humiliate, and Lisa, she was finally free. As Mark stumbled out of the room, clutching the divorce papers, the party atmosphere began to shift. What had started as a humiliating spectacle for Lisa turned into an unforgettable moment of empowerment. The guests, who had been awkwardly silent before, now began to applaud. Some approached Lisa, offering words of admiration and support. It was clear that her courage and composure had left a lasting impact on everyone who witnessed it. Lisa took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in years. This wasn't just the end of her marriage. It was the start of a new chapter, one where she wouldn't let anyone dim her light again. She smiled as her closest friends rallied around her, offering their love and reassurance. The night ended not with bitterness, but with hope. Lisa walked out of that party with her head held high, ready to embrace the life she deserved.